Welcome to another episode of 30 Minutes with a Modern Mystic. Welcome, Michael. Today's topic is?
Today's topic is going to be compassion.
Would you like to share with us how we came up with it?
Well, we have, in our lives, we always have people who get sick, and I look back on so many. You get to my age, and there's so many people get sick and get seriously sick, get cancers in the places that the prognosis is not good, and and you have these feelings, and much of the feeling is helpless. And it doesn't matter if they were if I'm in Australia and they were in Europe or in America or Britain or wherever, or if they were next door. You have these feelings, you feel completely helpless. There's nothing you can do. And it's the truth. There is nothing you can do. But you feel this compassion. And then the problem is, what do you do with your compassion? I mean, you can't do anything with it. You can't take it to them and put it all over them like a blanket. How many times do you say, I'm so sorry, because they don't want to hear it. And there's no need to be sorry. It's life happening. And then you find you don't know what to say. I remember when Trini went through her transition, I went to Japan within 3 months, and I wasn't ready. And I spent a lot of time there crying. And Toshi, who owned a tiny, that means about 6 chairs, restaurant, which is quite common in Japan, 6 or 8 chairs, eight's getting bigger. And he came up to me and he looked at me mutely and he said, and he spoke good English, I don't know what to say. I just don't know what to say. And I said, it's okay, Toshi, there's nothing to say. But I could feel his compassion. And I realized on the receiving end of it, he felt compassion for me. And on the receiving end of it, I could just feel his energy that was embracing and caring. And all he could, I don't know what to say. And when you think about it, you have somebody you love who gets seriously ill, very seriously ill. Not long ago, it was my daughter-in-law, one of my daughter-in-laws, stage 4 cancer. First she knew of it was when they did an exploration. And when she came round, she's got an outside bag. She's got lost a lump of a bowel. And you feel so helpless. In the end, we were able to say, okay, you come and live at our place, because they were in a tough time in their life, and they spent about 21 months living with us, something like that. But then you could express your compassion.
I guess I guess that compassion is even stronger when it hits your children, or someone who's younger, like your younger brother maybe, and
you can express the compassion by helping. But otherwise, if you're not in a situation to help, it's a strange one, compassion. I couldn't say I fully recognize what it is. I think many people, we all have different expressions of compassion. In the end, it's something that comes from our deeper feelings, our emotions and our heart toward that other person. And I suspect they feel it as I felt it from Toshi.
would you say that there's a relationship of some sort between compassion and unconditional love?
I think they hold hands and probably hug much of the time. But then that brings it, if you have unconditional love for yourself, do you have compassion for yourself? Now, most people express compassion outwards. You don't hear of anybody ever really saying, I felt so much compassion for myself. They so much compassion for other people, but really we should be very compassionate about ourselves.
I
I
guess,
look back through, it's okay. I was going to say, I look back through my life and there've been some very tight and painful places. And I feel enormous compassion for myself as I look back. But then I smile. I think, well, what does this do? But then I realize it does, because all time occupies the same moment. And so, on a physical linear level, we look back and we think it's all in the past, and that's the way our program runs. But if you're feeling compassion from yourself now, back to when you were 20 years younger and struggling hard and trying to make a decision and you didn't know what the right one was, then you could look back at yourself and feel enormous compassion, which metaphysically in that moment you could feel for yourself. Which doesn't make linear sense, but
yeah.
we're not actually linear beings. We only live in a linear world. You know, we've got to break through the illusion.
So our future, so to speak, selves constantly inspire our current and past selves.
In the moment, our conscious feeling, I mean, compassion is a conscious act. There's no such thing as subconscious compassion any more than there's subconscious love. And so you've got to be conscious. And if you're conscious in the moment and feeling it for somebody, whoever they are, you feel compassion for them, that energy connects with them because we're one humanity and they're not separate from us, even though, you know, I might be in Australia and they might be in America. The compassion connects with them and it carries healing energy. It carries upliftment. It carries good things. But still, when you come down to it, what is compassion? There's nothing you can put your finger on
It's very
because
difficult,
in the
yeah.
end, there's no intellectual explanation in the end.
Maybe compassion is like the closest human expression to unconditional love.
Yeah. And it's interesting, if you look at compassion, does that mean compressed passion?
I would say it means to have passion with somebody, right?
Well, I mean, you know, you can't have compassion without passion. And so you're feeling very, very deeply concerned for somebody. You're feeling deep love for them, deep care for them, deep hope for them. And you compress all those things together and you've got compassion, you know,
Mm.
and
We talked about this before, and maybe it's in line with the development or the unfolding of unconditional love in a human being, where, as for most people, even compassion is a very selective thing, right? So you would feel very compassionate for maybe your closest family members, maybe your partner, maybe your closest friends, and that's about it. If you saw someone down on the street who's suffering, maybe on average people would not feel compassionate, but then the further you're maybe the further you evolve spiritually or the further your frequency rises, maybe you get to a point where you feel compassion with the whole world, no matter who it is, no matter what their place is. And then it equals unconditional love, kind of, maybe.
well, and that's where lessons lie. I mean, I know I've told the story, and I might just say it briefly because it fits in now. But I used to watch the elderly in Nambour, and a lot of them were old men. And I realized they were probably younger than me, and they were walking around on sticks. They were overweight, they were overfed, they were probably been drinking too much. And I just saw them as victims of themselves, and I had no compassion. Then I had my engagement with the stinging tree and got very badly stung. Then my kidneys started to bleed because of the toxin went in instead of coming out in huge rashes. It went in. Then the toxin paralyzed my bladder. And just remembering that there is the components of our trapdoor spider venom, which is a killer, it can kill people easily, is in our stinging tree, in our Australian tropical stinging tree. And so that did all those things. It put me with a catheter. I ended up with a catheter, which was the size of a garden hose pipe,
Very
because
nice.
it had to tray it. That's not funny. And then I end up in hospital, I happen to have it all taken away. And then I have to stay there until I've done the triage, which is 3 Ps, where I basically got to empty your bladder down to less than 20%. And men of my age mostly seem to have 15 to 20% always in their bladder. Well, that wouldn't get me out anyway. And so I'm sitting there drinking coffee, trying to make this happen. And I watch in the hospital elderly people walking along with their little pushers and their bag feeding plasma into their bodies. And I looked at them, and it's as though a door opened in my heart. And I had this sudden realization, oh my God, here are the people. I did this to myself. I'm one of them now. And I just felt so much love for them and compassion. And I realized the whole incident I'd been through, which took about 18 days, was for me to learn to have compassion for people I don't know. And previously, didn't really judge, but I did judge them. I judged them, and I was right in my judgment. Correct, not right, correct. They were victims of themselves, but I didn't feel compassion. Now, Sascha, I walk in the same places and I see these people, and I genuinely feel love and compassion for them. And so when you're a spiritual teacher and you're putting it out there, it has to be in here. And I suspect when you're not, you could walk past them and it would be an understandable thing that you wouldn't feel compassion because you don't know them. And we tend not to have much compassion for people we don't know. Although social media, in many ways, I have read of people's compassion for the other people in their outpouring of words that they only know on social media. And so although it has a lot of negative sides, it does have a side of quite a number of positive sides. And one of them, I have read outpourings of compassion for people, their animals that are dying, and all sorts of things. So, one could look at that and say it's not good, but you could also say it's not bad. It's what we make it to be.
True. Now, if we go back to that field of difficulties that may arise in the wake of feeling compassion for somebody, I think really the core of all of this is because part of us is kind of anchored in that spiritually advanced, neutral position where we feel like, okay, I feel compassion for that person having created their own situation. And another part of us is completely entangled in our emotional chaos. So the moment we feel that compassion, that enlightened compassion or whatever, from that place, we're automatically bringing in all these emotional ties and things and attachments into the mix. And I think that's what at least for myself, that's what I've been observing myself, that every time this happens, that's when compassion turns into this, for me, emotionally tricky kind of beast. Whereas if I manage to stay in that neutral position as a no, don't have to get attached to this or that memory or this feeling about the person or whatever, then it's okay. Not sure. What's your take on this?
That's a very, very good explanation. I think you did that very, very well. I mean, it really does say, I've been in that place. Now, I have to say, I don't feel the tangle of emotions. I don't feel that tangle of emotions. As though I'm standing back. And in fact, I've even felt a touch of guilt because I didn't feel the emotions.
Oh, yeah, that's what I
And
was just saying before. That's another aspect to this whole thing. So when you do manage to stay in this neutral, enlightened, compassionate
yeah,
state, and
yeah.
you have a friend, a partner, a relative, someone who you dearly love, suffering in whatever way, you might feel guilty, right? You feel like, oh my God, this is
Well,
really what I'm feeling so good inside, but I shouldn't share it.
well, I don't feel that. No, I feel guilty in as much as I have felt guilty, and as much as I have not felt a mixture of emotions, which I used to feel once. But then it's a passing thing because, why should I feel guilty? Um,
Sure.
so by not having emotions. And so I stay with it. But I'm always amazed if I watch a television program, for instance, and there's a car crash and three are dead and one is alive. And then later the whole story comes, they feel guilty because they're alive.
Sure.
And I've talked to Vietnam vets who have felt guilty. One guy told me he's walking in a file, and the man in front of him, who was his closest friend, suddenly had no head on his shoulders, and a large, I don't know, something had taken it off. It had gone, and he felt guilty for the next 10, 15 years. He felt guilt and had to work his way through his guilt because it wasn't his head that got blown off.
Yeah.
He lived. And I've never been able to quite comprehend that. Now, I've never been in that situation, and I would prefer not to. Thank you
I
very
think in
much.
partnerships, is in relationships, it's a very common thing is if your partner gets really sick, for people to feel, oh, it should have been me.
Okay, well, now I didn't feel that with Trini.
Okay.
Not for 1 second did I feel that, because I tend to very much, we each create in every moment of our life, we are creating
Right.
the direction and content
Right.
of every moment. And so I didn't feel that, but I do sort of understand where that comes from. And that comes from what you just talked about, the muddled emotions. And in that muddle, where for many people, guilt dominates. It's a
So
very strong.
so
And
since
I've never been a person who's felt overly guilty about anything.
so maybe since turning compassion upside down doesn't really get us anywhere, maybe it's a good thing to look at this emotional cloud that we bring in when we feel compassion and ways how we can manage that in a healthier way towards emotional balance. Like how to
I
deal with
think
your emotions in regards to compassion.
I think it doesn't take somebody in trouble for us to have, most people's emotions are a mess.
Sure.
Well, they're a complete mess. I mean,
Yeah.
they're just my brother. My brother's 3 years older than me. He's an emotional model on two legs, and nothing's ever going to change. So his next incarnation, maybe he needs to look at his emotions, because this time has been all about his intellect, which is pretty amazing. So I don't personally see much correlation between compassion triggering a gamut of emotions any more than hitting your thumb with a hammer or watching your friend, fall off his bicycle, or having your child die before you. They all show us how emotionally unstable we are. And I was shown when Trini died, I went through my process, and I should have known better. But when you realize that so many of our relationships are based in emotional attachments, not just to wives or husbands and children, but to good close friends. We get emotionally attached to them. And if they're suddenly not there, our emotions go through the whole range, and we grieve and all sorts of things. A lot of people are challenged when I say, we shouldn't really have to grieve. And Carolyn challenged me on that. And I'm just sort of saying that, you know, where I came from, a fifth dimension, there was no grieving because there was a celebration. It was a choice. I'm moving on. But then they didn't have our illnesses and they didn't have our so-called accidents. And we still have the idea today that an illness catches you. I caught a cold, I caught COVID, I caught something, but they never say, geez, I feel good today. I caught it off Michael yesterday. I spent a couple of hours with him and he was so buoyant. I caught healthy from him. And today I'm feeling brilliant. We never do that. It's always downwards. In other words, let's not take responsibility for what we have. And in fact, we are responsible.
I'm curious.
So
yeah, go ahead.
if we were to drop that whole line of thinking that what we caught, it would be probably good for us, what we created.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. Just today, I was kind of wondering, because of various different cases, friends and family members going through different difficult things. And I had this idea, I had this feeling that looking at all of this, if somebody asked, what's the purpose of it all? What's the purpose of life in that context? I would probably say to transcend all these emotional and mental patterns that we have created over so much time through the experience of their materialized consequences. And then the more we learn to transcend these consequences of our own mental and emotional patterns, seeing them manifested in reality, we get a little wiser step by step by step by step. And until we get to that point where we like almost leave being human or leave humanity behind in a positive way, and we become this other divine type of being where it's different. That was my impression.
I like the end. It's different. I'm not sure I would use the word transcend, although I know you're talking in the sense of rise above it.
Transform.
But,
yeah.
I found that in my own journey, as I face these various things, once I began to take responsibility that everything and every moment I created, then I began to look at it, well, why did I create that? Why did I create that? And then I began to see that's what I've always done. There's a program. Long ago, I had a row with one of my sons, and we hurt each other. And and then I took hurt and blamed him for it for 2 or 3 years. He did the same with me. And then I one day looked at it and realized, okay, I own that I'm hurt. Why am I hurt? He said those things to me, but this was several years ago now. I'm holding on to hurt. So why am I holding on to hurt? And it came to me very clearly. That's what we do. We hold on to it. Then we can hold on to blame. And then it's nothing to do with me. Hurt and blame, it's all about him. And I realized, but then if I create my reality, this doesn't fit. If I create my reality, so I looked at it and suddenly realized, wow, I don't have to stay hurt. He offered it to me, but I didn't have to run with it for the next 2 years. I could have said, ouch, this hurts, and put it down. But I ran with it. I ran with it because that's what we do. We always do that. And we run with it into other incarnations. We just run with it.
I just had this crazy... I just had this funny image in my head, like you give a machine gun to a little child and it takes it in his hands like...
Yes.
And then until it realizes, oh, I just have to control the trigger. and it stands still.
Yeah, I just shot my dad and my mum and all my neighbors.
That's probably how we are in regards to our emotional powerhouse of creation, right? We got this
Well,
thing and we're like,
I had the image come up of a rugby match, and you know
so
the
you're in Australia,
guys
I'm in
running
Florida. These are the different images.
he's running with the ball, and everybody's trying to get away from him, and they hurt each other doing it. But anyway, I put it down. I put it down, and I made a choice. I'm going to choose love. So I chose to love him, and I chose to love myself. And within a month or two, the hurt had all gone and the blame had all gone. And so gradually you create your life like that through. And in fact, you use the word, you are transcending, but you're not transcending what you're transcending your own subconscious creations. You're transcending the subconscious creation of your life, and as you transcend, you begin the conscious creation of your life, and you begin to consciously create, and then you find that's what works for you. You know, it works for you. But while we do it subconsciously, but somewhere along the line, you have to step in with, I did this to myself. Now, Katrina, my daughter-in-law, she did that. When she woke up, within, I understand, about 24 hours, and getting over the shock, oh my God, I got stage 4 cancer, I've been operated on and all this. With the shock of that, she then realized I'd created this. It's my creation. And that began her journey out of it. And she didn't have chemotherapy, but she did have Gershon therapy in Mexico. Was where it began. Then you continue it at home for 2 years. But she left it all behind, and she's completely clear of cancer. But she took responsibility. And I think she saw a point where she created that. I'm not sure if everybody could see that. You know, I have friends who are suffering badly now, and I look at it, do they know where that moment was that this journey of creating something that is killing their body began? Katrina did. She knew where that began. And in just a flash of insight.
I guess the
And
tricky,
so,
sorry.
well, I suspect that if you feel a deep compassion for yourself, it might reveal that.
I guess
Because
another,
we turned compassion so outward instead of inward. Sorry.
that's all right. I guess another very tricky component is that if we intellectually think that we get it, that's not the same as having this deep realization, this deep feeling of knowing, oh my God. Because
They're in
then,
different worlds.
yeah, because then there's no thought or no nothing. It's just, you know, oh my God. And then suddenly it's different without you wanting it to be different or without anything.
The moment I was sat there in that hospital, the catheter was removed, and I need to do these P's, and
You
they
didn't think
walked by
about
me
it.
like a file of them walking up to me. And I looked at them, oh my God, walking past me. Oh my God, I'm one of them. Okay, I wasn't pushing anything, but I'd been walking strangely with a tube stuck up you for enough days to get the message. And it was, oh my God, that's me. And suddenly the whole picture changed. And I realized, because I hadn't a clue why I'd done all that, but I was looking because of who I am. You know, why did I do this to myself? But it came in a complete revelation. And I felt a new, old, rusty door in my heart open up. Most of the others were, but it's like there are many doors to our heart. And this one opened up, and I couldn't help but smile and think, God, you haven't been open for a long time.
Probably the degree of compassion one feels for other people is equal to the, like, how open your heart is, maybe.
There's a lot to say in that. Yes, definitely. There's a lot in that. But sometimes you see some people's heart swings open and they express through anger. And that's not really the heart swinging open, it's the intellect grasping something that enrages it. Whereas if the heart fell over with it, maybe go forgiveness and or acceptance.
Would you say that compassion could ever be unhealthy or dangerous at some point, or is compassion always something that is beneficial to you?
I think if compassion ended your life, then it would be a wonderful way to end your life. So no, I don't think it could be dangerous at all. Like if you end your life on a high, you go into the next stage on a high, and that's a nice way to go. Better than a low.
To close
It's,
on it, yeah, go ahead. I was just
I
going to
was
say
going to say,
yeah. I was just going to say, as always, to close on a practical tip or hint for the people watching.
well, I think
Maybe it
the
should be
one that
about, yeah, no, you go ahead, please.
I was going to say, what comes to mind is, and I hadn't sort of realized it before we started talking about it, is that compassion is so much of an outward expression. And when we turn it inwards, we say, oh, I'm feeling sorry for myself. This is self-pity. So where do we find the line between self-pity and compassion for oneself?
Very fine
And
line.
it's a very, very fine line, and it's a different line for every person. I think self-pity says, poor me, why is this happening to me? Whereas compassion was tend to say more, because I find compassion is a higher level of expression. And I don't care if a person was a murderer and found compassion, it's still a higher level of expression. Self-pity is the lower, and we'll say self-compassion is the higher. And I think that when you feel compassion for yourself, you've switched on the healing button, whereas self-pity doesn't go near it. Compassion for yourself is timeless, and so is self-pity, but self-pity takes you into a lower place, whereas when you feel compassion for yourself, you're moving yourself, even though you don't realize it, into a higher place. And considering that we're creating every moment of our lives, I would say to people, have compassion for yourself as well as for other people. And it doesn't always, compassion doesn't need to be triggered by people who are dying or seriously ill. You can have compassion for a person who's just struggling, that you see who is struggling in life, and there's nothing much you can do, but your compassion, your feeling for them, your even the question, do I help or do I stand back? And if I help, am I helping or am I creating more helplessness? Like they're all questions that go with it. And I've often felt that it's like the old saying, you teach a village to fish, how to catch fish for themselves, not keep feeding them fish. Because if you keep feeding them fish, they stay helpless. And it's the same with a child learning to ride a bike for the first time. You know they're going to fall over a few times. And okay, you can put training wheels on to stop it. But when I was a kid, there were no training wheels and you fell off a few times. My dad knew I would. I knew I would. But hey, this is way too exciting to let that put me off. And so he let me fall off a few times and I quickly was less helpless. And so I feel compassion is feeling deeply, but standing back often and allowing that person to learn their lesson and make their mistakes. And it hurts you. It hurts you to see it happen. And that's when you know there's compassion there, feeling, caring, but the strength to stand back and allow them to grow or to know this is a time to step in and let your compassion express in a different way. And there's no way that I can say where that line is or how you do that. I would simply say you follow your heart, not the head, the heart.
No, I was just, I know was supposed to be the closing remark, but I need to add this. I was just listening to all you said from a perspective of me saying this to myself, and all of it made sense the same way as I would looking on somebody else. Like, and how, what a beautiful place you end up in if you are this gentle and compassionate with yourself. If you can look at all the mistakes you make, at all the problems you've created, and look at yourself like a little child and just be compassionate, say, oh, it's okay, you can do these mistakes.
That is a tremendous step along the path. It's an enormous healing, and it's the way to go. It took me a long time to get there, but I did get to that place, and now I'm very compassionate with myself as well as other people. Yeah. And as I say, I look back through my life and I just feel compassion. Oh my God, you were struggling and hurting and hitting out and angry. You poor little dear. You did the best you could. It's okay, Michael. It's good stuff.
I love the grandpa, like, it's okay. Looking at
And
yourself.
it is. Nearly always it is. It's okay. You know, just it's a lot changes when you know that you create every moment of your life, and that in this moment you are creating your past and your future every moment. You're recreating your past. We've got this idea that the past is fixed and stuck and you can't change it. That is completely wrong. Compassion for you in your past changes the past.
Let's do it.
And so that leaves a door open for a different one another time. You know, can we change the past?
That could be an interesting topic for one, yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, none of us is writing any of this down, so we.
I will. There you go.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for listening. You know what's next. Click the buttons below, subscribe, like, share, and whatnot. Join Michael's teachings. He's got this teaching platform. You get 10-day free trial now. That's new. Go in there. You can watch all of his videos. Hope to see you next time. Till then.
Thank you for being with us. And thank you, Sascha.
Lots of love.